In today's video, we're taking a look at some NHL trade rumors. It comes from the latest edition of TSN Insider Trading in Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts blog. Teams we're looking at today include the Montreal Canadiens, the Edmonton Oilers, the Florida Panthers, San Jose Sharks, and St. Louis Blues. We'll jump into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, I want to take a look at some updated NHL trade rumors here today from a few sources, including Sportsnet and TSN. Of course, we saw a major trade go down late last night after the Maple Leafs and Rangers game completed. The Leafs announced a major trade with the Los Angeles Kings, acquiring backup goaltender Jack Campbell and bottom six forward Kyle Clifford from the Kings in exchange for Trevor Moore and a couple of picks. So one of the biggest trade rumors for some time is who are the Leafs going to be going after for a backup goaltender. So that question has now been answered, assuming Michael Hutchinson goes down to the minors. The money side of it for the Leafs is exactly even. The money going in and out between Hutchinson to the minors, Trevor Moore to LA is exactly the same as what's coming in between the contracts for Campbell and Kyle Clifford. Of course, the Kings did retain half of Clifford's contract as well. And for Kyle Dubas, two players he's very familiar with. Of course, this is not the first time he traded for Campbell. He acquired him back when he was the GM for the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds in the Ontario Hockey League in junior. He acquired Campbell by picking him up from the Windsor Spitfires. And then later, when he became a player agent, Kyle Clifford was actually his first ever client. So two people he's extremely familiar with. As we've seen with this Leafs organization, that seems to be a trend here with Dubas bringing in people he's very familiar with, people he's close to and trust to get the job done. So that trade rumor for that part of the Leafs, I guess, will be all wrapped up for the time being. I guess now we'll have to wait and see how they address their blue line here. Clearly, they didn't give up a whole lot to get the backup goaltending situation addressed. So we'll have to move forward now and see how they move forward on the defensive side of the equation. Now, there was also talk on NHL Insider Trading about the possibility of the Florida Panthers making a hockey trade and trading winger Mike Hoffman in order to shore up their blue line. Clearly, the Florida Panthers are having a pretty solid year. They're battling hard for a playoff spot, and as of right now, I think their odds of getting into the playoffs are certainly pretty good. They certainly have no problem putting the puck in the net, and Mike Hoffman is a fairly substantial part of that offense, but they have plenty of other offensive weapons as well. I mean, they have Alexander Barkov, you got Huberdeau, Dodonov, just to name a few others. I mean, they're a very offensive team, so to trade an offensive player like Hoffman, they would still have lots of firepower in that lineup, and that blue line could certainly use some help. I know a recent interview that was discussed with the insiders on Insider Trading with Dale Talon, the GM of the Panthers, kind of indicated that he feels that the blue line has been inconsistent, needs some defensive help. A guy like Mike Matheson, for example, has been playing up a little bit too many minutes, too high in the lineup. They'd like to bring somebody else in to kind of take the pressure off and kind of ease the load on him as well. So certainly somebody who can play a strong defensive game, possibly somebody who could pair with Aaron Ekblad, and really Hoffman would be more than the trade chip they need to accomplish that. I think a lot of teams are going to be interested in Hoffman. One team that was mentioned who were very interested before, back when his days with the Senators, was the St. Louis Blues. The Stanley Cup champions, as we know, have been very much linked to adding a top six forward to replace injured forward Vladimir Tarasenko. I know we've talked a lot about the possibility of Chris Kreider landing in St. Louis, and I do think they have interest there as well. But I do think it makes a lot of sense that if the Panthers are willing to possibly move Hoffman, that the Blues might be a good landing spot for him. I'm not sure which defenseman they would be looking to trade to bring him in, but they certainly have some capable defensemen there who might be of interest to the Panthers. But if you look around the league, there's lots of teams looking for top six forwards, not all of them willing to give up defensive defensemen. So I guess we'll have to kind of remain to be seen there. But certainly the Panthers, the fact that they're even willing to move Hoffman, who's a pending UFA, likely he doesn't come back. I'm not sure they can squeeze him into the salary cap, depending on what he's going to want for his next contract. He's certainly going to be getting a substantial amount of money. I think he's going to be over the age of 30, but he's got a proven record of being a solid goal scorer here over the past 4 or 5 years, and I think Mike Hoffman is going to get paid and might price himself out of Florida anyhow. Now, another team who's shown interest apparently in Mike Hoffman is the Edmonton Oilers. Now, the Oilers, as we know, looking to add a top six forward, and they've certainly had their name mentioned with a variety of players, but Hoffman apparently is one of those guys. But another guy they apparently have a lot of interest in, according to Elliot Friedman, is Thomas Tatar of the Montreal Canadiens, and the Oilers are not the only ones. He also mentions the Pittsburgh Penguins in his latest article, that both of these teams have a lot of interest in the Habs forward, who's been pretty solid since he was traded there from the Vegas Golden Knights in that Max Pacioretty deal. He's been a solid player for Montreal, and at this point, Habs fans, Marc Bergevin really doesn't have any reason to trade Tatar. I do think that there's a possibility that this doesn't even come close to happening, but at the same time, you have to realize that Tatar is a player who's generating interest because he's certainly going to be a guy who's played well, has not a lot of term left on his contract. He's not getting paid a crazy amount of money, so teams are interested. They're calling, they're talking to Montreal. Doesn't mean a deal is going to get done. I do think a team is going to have to offer a substantial package to land a guy like Tatar to Montreal. I think the belief with the Habs organization is that the injuries have really decimated their playoff hopes this year, and if they do end up missing, which right now is looking like a real possibility here, that they're going to reset for next year, and that they probably will make some changes in the offseason, but I don't see them really blowing things up or really kind of trading anything too significant off the roster, probably doing some tinkering throughout the offseason to kind of make a few changes, of course, but I'm not really sure that Tatar is a guy that Bergevin intends to trade. But if they come calling with a solid offer out of Edmonton or Pittsburgh, as the interest apparently is there, we possibly could see a move. Now, staying with the Oilers, they are having contract negotiations as well, an extension for defenseman Darnell Nurse. Of course, we saw them lock up forward Zach Kassian not long ago. Now their attention on contracts has turned to Nurse on the defensive side of the game. He would like a long-term contract, but it's going to be difficult for them to squeeze in what he would earn on a 6, 7, 8-year deal under the salary cap. So more than likely here, what the Oilers are going to be trying to do is probably do a 2 to 3 year term to try to squeeze out a lower average annual value for the time being, and then at the same time, hopefully extend him and to get him longer term paid with a bigger money deal afterwards. But many NHL insiders are urging the fact here that Nurse wants to be an Oiler. He wants to remain in Edmonton, so fans should not be concerned if they do end up doing a shorter term contract. Now, another player getting a lot of interest apparently is Columbus Blue Jacket forward Josh Anderson, who's currently battling an injury, but is also going to be a restricted free agent at the end of the season. Now, Columbus is in the hunt here for a playoff spot, and I really don't see the fact that they would want to trade a guy like Anderson heading into the playoffs unless something drastic happens with this organization in the next 2 or 3 weeks and they suddenly fall out of the contention. I don't see them really making any moves to subtract off their roster. Last year we saw them go all in, and I don't think we're going to see anything drastic like that either. Personally, I think maybe some minor tinkering at most would be what the Blue Jackets do, but they're not in a rush with Josh Anderson. He's a restricted free agent. They can take their time and do this in the offseason if need be, but teams are calling. One team that was linked to having some interest in Anderson was the Boston Bruins, but certainly, like I said, I don't think the Jackets are in any kind of hurry to trade him. He's been a big part of their team, but as long as they remain in the playoff hunt, I really don't see that happening. But his name is in the rumor mill, with multiple teams showing interest and apparently contacting Columbus to check in on his availability. Now, lastly here, I want to touch on a bit of an article from The Athletic and Kevin Kurz, who covers the San Jose Sharks, discussing some players he feels are almost a certainty to be moved, and that includes defenseman Brendan Dillon, forward Melker Karlsson, and goaltender Aaron Dell. He feels all three of them are very likely to be traded. You could possibly add Aaron Dell's name to the list of goalies we were looking at earlier, too, for potential guys the Leafs could be looking at. But at this point, NHL insiders haven't linked the two as possibly having interest there, but I guess we'll see. But one of the more interesting players I'm kind of keeping an eye on myself for the Sharks is longtime NHL veteran Joe Thornton. Whether or not he's going to be moved to go chase a Stanley Cup down with another team, even Patrick Marleau as well. But there was some talk amongst NHL insiders and different media sources I've heard today about the possibility of Thornton possibly going to the Vegas Golden Knights with his former head coach Peter DeBoer. Now, of course, DeBoer was recently named the head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights after replacing Gerard Gallant. And certainly, Thornton is a player that he has a lot of respect for. And if he thinks that the Golden Knights could certainly use another forward addition with a lot of experience, then he could certainly be a guy to be brought in for probably a fairly cheap price tag to give Thornton a shot at chasing a Stanley Cup. Now, I know it might seem a little weird having DeBoer be in Vegas after being a longtime coach of the San Jose Sharks, and of course the two are very heated rivals, so to see them doing business like that might seem a little odd, but certainly stranger things have happened, to say the least, and Joe Thornton could find himself on another team here before the deadline is out, chasing a Stanley Cup. There's been less talk about Patrick Marleau, not to say that couldn't happen for him as well. I haven't really heard a whole lot about Marleau, so I'm not sure if other teams are inquiring. I'm sure that the Sharks and Doug Wilson are going to go to both these veterans, kind of plan out what they're willing to do and not do, and see what opportunities they might like to have, should he be able to find a fit to send them on to chase the Stanley Cup. So I guess we will see. I think it's fair to say Marleau and Thornton are both two of the stronger, better players in NHL history, have had tremendous careers and don't have their name on that Stanley Cup yet. So it'll certainly be interesting to see if they'll get a chance to chase a cup with another organization this spring. So of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions on everything discussed here today, so make sure you leave some comments and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications, and checking out our membership options. If you haven't already done so, I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you next time.